She never believed in holiday magic, until she met her. The last bell of the term rang like a burst of freedom. Cheers erupted down the corridors of Willowbrook Primary, footsteps pounding against polished floors as children raced into the crisp December afternoon. The faint scent of cinnamon from the staff room mingled with the sharper tang of cold air sweeping in through the open doors. Claire Matthews leaned against her desk and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Another term done. She adored her students, their messy handwriting, their endless questions, their untamed laughter, but by the end of December, even the most patient teacher ran on fumes. Her classroom, however, looked like a page torn from a Christmas card. Paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling, tinsel draped across the bookshelves, and a lopsided construction paper tree, crafted entirely by her students, leaned cheerfully in the corner. It was noisy with color and care, and Claire smiled despite her exhaustion. Her gaze fell on the neat pile of essays she'd planned to mark over the break. She sighed. So much for resting. A knock at the open door pulled her from her thoughts. Miss Matthews? Claire looked up to find Sophie Harper, her brightest and most imaginative pupil, hovering shyly. Sophie was a small whirlwind of curls and ideas, her brown eyes filled with questions that never seemed to run out. Yes, Sophie? Claire said warmly. My mum's here. She said she has a minute if you wanted to, talk. Before Claire could respond, a woman appeared behind Sophie, and the world seemed to shift. Emily Harper. Claire had seen her once before in passing, but up close she was something else entirely. Her brown curls peeked out beneath a knitted hat dusted with snowflakes, and her coat looked far too thin for the cold. But it was her smile, gentle, a little hesitant, yet somehow dazzling, that caught Claire off guard. Sorry to intrude, Emily said, her voice carrying a softness that warmed the room. I just wanted to thank you properly for everything you've done for Sophie this term. She hasn't stopped talking about your class. Claire felt heat rise to her cheeks. Compliments never sat comfortably with her, yet Emily's words seemed to find their way past all her defenses. She's a joy to have, Claire managed. Truly. Sophie's imagination is rare. She writes like someone much older. Emily's smile widened, pride flickering in her eyes. She rested a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Told you, didn't I? She murmured to Sophie, who giggled. They spoke a little longer, about Sophie's love of storytelling, about the holiday homework, about the Christmas play rehearsals. Claire found herself reluctant to end the conversation. She noticed the way Emily leaned in just slightly when she spoke, the spark of curiosity in her gaze, the way her laugh seemed to brighten the dull gray of the winter's afternoon. Eventually, Emily glanced at the time and sighed. We should let you finish up. I'm sure you've got piles of work waiting for you. Claire glanced at the stack of essays, then back at Emily. Nothing that can't wait, she said, surprising herself. Emily hesitated at the doorway, as though she wanted to say more, then smiled instead. Merry Christmas, Miss Matthews. Claire's name felt different in her mouth. Softer. Sweeter. Merry Christmas, Claire replied, her heart beating far too fast for such a simple exchange. And just like that, they were gone, Sophie chattering about costumes, Emily's laughter echoing faintly down the hall. Claire sat back at her desk, staring out at the falling snow beyond the window. She had told herself Christmas was for her students, for her nieces and nephews, for everyone but herself. But for the first time in years, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this Christmas might hold something unexpected. Something worth believing in. Snow had fallen steadily all morning, coating the town in a fresh blanket of white. Willowbrook's main street was alive with color, strings of golden lights zigzagging between lampposts, stalls set up with wreaths, gingerbread, and steaming mugs of cider. The Christmas market came once a year, and though Claire usually only stopped by briefly, something tugged at her to linger this time. She walked slowly through the stalls, her red scarf pulled tight around her neck, gloved hands tucked in her coat pockets. Families bustled past, children tugging their parents toward carousel rides and sweet stands. The air was sharp, but festive. Claire paused to admire a stall selling handmade ornaments, running her fingers over a carved wooden angel, when a familiar laugh lifted above the crowd. Her chest tightened. She knew that laugh already. Turning, she saw them. Emily and Sophie stood by the carousel, Sophie's curls bouncing as she pointed excitedly at the painted reindeer. Emily's cheeks were flushed pink from the cold, her eyes bright with amusement as she tried to convince her daughter to wait for the next ride. Claire hesitated, caught between the safety of slipping away unnoticed and the sudden, almost childlike thrill of being seen. "Miss Matthews." Sophie's voice carried, as though the decision had been made for her. Both Emily and Sophie waved her over, and before she could second-guess, Claire found herself weaving through the crowd toward them. "You came." Sophie beamed, bouncing on her toes. "I did," Claire said, her smile softening as her eyes met Emily's. "Couldn't resist the gingerbread." Emily laughed, the sound rich and warm. "It's a dangerous place, isn't it? I promised Sophie just one ride, but I think I've been talked into 3 already." Sophie tugged at both of them. "Ride with us. Please, Miss Matthews." Claire blinked, startled. She glanced at Emily, expecting her to dismiss the idea, but Emily only shrugged with a teasing smile. "Why not? It's Christmas." And so, a few minutes later, Claire found herself climbing onto a painted reindeer, Sophie perched proudly between them. The carousel lurched to life, music tinkling, lights spinning around them in a golden blur. Claire hadn't ridden one of these since she was a child, and yet, there she was, laughing as Sophie threw her arms wide, her giggles echoing into the cold night. Emily's hand brushed against Claire's as they steadied Sophie, and though it was the briefest touch, Claire felt warmth bloom beneath her skin. When the ride slowed and came to a stop, Claire almost wished it would keep going. "Hot chocolate?" Emily suggested, and Claire found herself nodding before her mind had even caught up. They wandered together to a nearby stall, Sophie skipping ahead. The smell of cocoa and cinnamon wrapped around them as they each cradled steaming paper cups. For a while, they simply walked, through rows of twinkling stalls, past children singing carols, beneath arches of fairy lights strung high above. Emily glanced sideways at her, a smile playing at her lips. "So, do you ever do more than work? Or are you one of those teachers who lives entirely in the classroom?" Claire chuckled softly. "Guilty as charged. I suppose I let my students take up most of my world." She hesitated, then added, quieter, "It's easier than letting anyone else in." Emily's expression softened, and for a moment, the noise of the market seemed to fade around them. "Maybe you just haven't met the right people to let in." Claire's breath caught. She wanted to ask, "And are you one of them?" but the words tangled, too bold for the moment. Instead, Sophie came racing back, clutching a bag of candied nuts. "Look! They gave me extra," she exclaimed, breaking the spell. Emily laughed, reaching to smooth her daughter's hair. "You're spoiled already." She glanced back at Claire, and there was something in her gaze that lingered, something that promised this wasn't just chance. As they parted ways near the end of the street, Emily touched Claire's arm lightly. "We'll see you at rehearsal tomorrow?" "Yes," Claire said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Good." Emily's smile curved into something that felt like a secret. Then, "Merry almost Christmas." As Claire walked home beneath the falling snow, she realized her heart was no longer heavy with the familiar ache of December loneliness. Instead, it beat with anticipation, like the hush before a carol begins, like the pause before unwrapping a gift. The week before Christmas always brought chaos to Willowbrook Primary. Costumes half-stitched, children half-memorized their lines, and teachers running on coffee and sugar cookies just to survive. Claire had learned to embrace the mess, because somehow, by the night of the play, it always came together. This year felt different. Emily had volunteered to help with the costumes and set pieces, and suddenly rehearsals were filled with her laughter, her steady hands, and her way of calming even the most excitable child. Claire found herself looking forward to those moments more than she wanted to admit, snatched conversations between painting scenery, quiet smiles exchanged while wrangling angel wings and shepherd staffs. On the Thursday before the play, they worked late in the hall, children long gone, music stands stacked in the corner. Emily knelt on the floor, pinning the hem of a robe, while Claire arranged paper stars across the stage backdrop. "You know," Emily said, glancing up at her, "you never told me if you liked Christmas yourself. You always ask the kids, but what about you?" Claire paused, star in hand. "I suppose. I like seeing everyone else enjoy it. But for me?" She hesitated, lowering her voice. "It's always been a little lonely." Emily's eyes softened. She rose from the floor, brushing glitter from her hands. "I know that feeling." They stood there, facing each other in the quiet hall, fairy lights strung across the stage casting a gentle glow. Claire wanted to reach out, to bridge the small space between them, but fear rooted her in place. Emily stepped closer, close enough that Claire could see the tiny flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. "Maybe," she said carefully, "this year doesn't have to be." The words hung between them, fragile and full of possibility. Claire's heart hammered, her lips parting to respond. "Miss Matthews?" The caretaker's voice echoed through the hall, breaking the moment. Claire stepped back, her breath catching, while Emily turned with a small, rueful smile. "Sorry," the caretaker said, oblivious. "Just locking up soon." "Of course," Claire murmured, her voice steadier than she felt. They packed up in silence, but as they walked out into the snowy night, Emily brushed Claire's hand with hers, so subtle it might have been accidental, yet deliberate enough to leave Claire's skin tingling. "See you tomorrow," Emily whispered, her smile carrying a secret promise. As Claire watched her disappear into the swirling snow, she realized something undeniable: she no longer dreaded Christmas. She craved it. For the first time in years, the season didn't feel like a reminder of what she lacked, but like the start of something she'd never dared hope for. Something magical. The night of the Christmas play arrived with a hush of falling snow. Parents filled the school hall, scarves unwound, cheeks pink from the cold, the air buzzing with chatter and the rustle of programs. On stage, shepherds fiddled with crooked staffs and angels tugged at their halos. Backstage, Claire crouched beside Sophie, who was dressed as a star. "Nervous?" she asked gently. Sophie shook her head, curls bouncing. "Not really. Mum said I should just pretend I'm telling a story to her." Claire smiled, her chest tightening with a warmth she couldn't name. "That's perfect advice." When Sophie ran off to join the others, Claire caught sight of Emily standing near the curtain, her gaze fixed on her daughter with pride. She wore a deep green coat that brought out the amber in her eyes, and as the lights dimmed, she slipped beside Claire. "You've worked magic with them," Emily whispered. Claire shook her head. "They did it all themselves." Emily's hand brushed her sleeve, brief, but enough to send Claire's heart racing. The play unfolded with the usual stumbles, forgotten lines, a sheep costume losing an ear, a shepherd sneezing mid-carol, but to the parents, it was perfection. And when Sophie stepped forward, voice steady and clear, narrating the story with a confidence that lit up the stage, Claire found herself glancing at Emily. Tears shone in Emily's eyes. When the final song ended and applause thundered through the hall, Claire felt something shift. She wasn't just proud of Sophie. She was proud of what they had created together, proud of the warmth that had grown in these weeks. After the hall emptied, Claire lingered by the school gates, reluctant to let the night end. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the streetlights, settling on her scarf. She almost turned to leave when she heard Emily's voice. "You're walking home?" Claire turned. Emily approached, Sophie asleep in her arms, her small face nestled against her mother's shoulder. Claire smiled softly at the sight. "I usually do," Claire said. Emily adjusted Sophie carefully, her eyes lifting to meet Claire's. "I can walk with you a little. I don't want the night to end yet." They walked in silence at first, their breath misting in the frosty air, footsteps crunching softly on the snow. Sophie slept peacefully, the town quiet around them. Finally, at the corner where their paths would split, Emily stopped. She shifted Sophie gently into her other arm and looked at Claire. The streetlight painted her features in gold, snow catching in her hair like tiny jewels. "You've done more than you know," Emily said softly. "For Sophie. For me. Coming back here. I didn't think it would ever feel like home again." But then, she broke off, her throat tight. "Then what?" Claire asked, her voice barely a whisper. Emily's eyes flickered with hesitation, then with courage. She reached for Claire's free hand, her fingers warm despite the cold. "Then I met you." Time stilled. The snow fell slower, the night quieter. Claire's chest ached with the weight of everything she had held back. "You don't have to spend another Christmas alone," Emily whispered, the same words she'd nearly spoken days ago in the hall. And this time, nothing interrupted them. Claire leaned forward, closing the distance, her lips brushing Emily's in the gentlest of kisses. It was tentative at first, an ask, a hope, but when Emily kissed her back, sure and certain, it felt like stepping into light after years of shadow. When they parted, Emily's forehead rested against hers, her breath warm in the cold air. "Merry Christmas, Claire." "Merry Christmas," Claire whispered, her heart full in a way she'd never thought possible. Or once, Christmas wasn't a season she survived. It was the beginning of something, bright, tender, and real. Sunlight streamed through the frosted windows, turning the snow outside into a glittering carpet. Claire stirred beneath the covers, the quiet hum of the house wrapping around her like a soft blanket. For the first time in years, she didn't wake to an empty apartment, to silence, to the usual ache of Christmas past. A soft giggle drew her attention. Sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, Sophie's curls catching the morning light, she carefully arranged a line of toy reindeer, speaking to them as if they could hear. "And this one goes here, and this one here." Sophie's voice trailed off when she spotted Claire at the doorway. Her face lit up in a grin that could melt snow. "Merry Christmas, Miss Matthews," she exclaimed, rushing over. Claire laughed, scooping Sophie into her arms for a quick hug. "Merry Christmas, Sophie." Emily appeared behind her daughter, wrapped in a cozy sweater, hair tousled from sleep, eyes sparkling with warmth. She held a tray with steaming mugs of cocoa, a plate of gingerbread still warm from the oven. "Merry Christmas," Emily said softly, setting the tray down. Her fingers brushed Claire's as she handed her a cup. The simple touch made Claire's heart flutter, steadying her in a way only Emily could. They sat together on the couch, sipping cocoa and watching Sophie play, the room alive with laughter, the scent of cinnamon and pine lingering. For Claire, the morning felt infinite, suspended in a perfect bubble of joy and belonging. At one point, Sophie crawled into Emily's lap, who leaned into Claire. Their hands found each other again, fingers lacing naturally, comfortably. Claire realized that this quiet, gentle togetherness, was the truest gift of all. "No more lonely Christmases," Emily whispered, resting her head against Claire's shoulder. "No more," Claire replied, pressing a soft kiss to the top of her head. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, the warmth of love and new beginnings filled the house. This was more than a holiday miracle. It was home. It was love. It was Christmas.